Welcome to the Ambitious Introvert podcast, created especially for introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive entrepreneurs to help you build, grow, and scale a successful, sustainable business. I'm your host, Emma-Louise Parks, business and mindset coach for ambitious introverts. After 17 years working as an air traffic controller, the ultimate fast-paced, high-stimulus, extrovert-friendly role, my mission now is to show introverts that they too can create big results and success because of who they are, not in spite of it. I focus on introvert-friendly business and marketing strategy to help you switch overwhelm for clarity, confidence, and clients. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Ambitious Introvert podcast. I'm Emma-Louise, and I loved this conversation that you are about to listen to so much because the dear Joanna Rawbone, who's today's guest, she and I have been in each other's orbits for a number of years now, both in the introverted coaching space, albeit with a very different type of target audience and client. But we have seen each other in summits and all these various places. I have mentioned Joanna to people when they've been looking for experts in her field. She's recommended me to people looking for business advice, and we had never actually spoken. So it was an absolute joy when she emailed me asking to be a guest on the podcast, and I truly, truly loved our conversation. So Joanna is an executive coach and a certified Myers Briggs Practitioner, and she really helps those mid-career introverts to decide what flourishing and fulfilment really mean to them. And I love this because I take a very values-based approach with my clients as well in building their business, and Joanna does that with people building their career. So obviously we're on the same page. We had so much in common. It's a really great conversation, especially because we both get quite animated about Myers-Briggs, which we love, about the different type of culture in different countries and how introversion is seen as a little bit of a lesser in a number of, larger Western democracies, should we say. So I really hope that you enjoy listening in. I will say that this was a few months ago that I recorded this with Joanna, and we had a number of Wi-Fi outages. My broadband provider was having a little bit of a nightmare that day, so much so it made the national news. And so if it does sound a little bit disjointed, although my editor has done a fantastic job of trying to make it cohesive, you can put that down to not Joanna or not my editor, but simply to the Wi-Fi deciding to cut out at the most inopportune moments. So with that all aside, thank you for tuning in. I really hope that you enjoy this chat with Joanna, and I hope that you feel empowered and ready to flourish at the end of it like she would want you to. Well, Joanna, as we said just before hitting record, it's lovely to finally speak to you because we feel like we've been in each other's worlds for many years and never actually connected.
Absolutely. So it's lovely to put a proper face to a name, not just a photograph to a name. So it's a pleasure to be here with you.
I always feel like, and I've said this a few times, when I came online with business in 2019 to be a coach, which I thought that was enough then. I didn't need to be any type of coach. I can just be a coach. And all that, very naive, but people need coaching. And I got incredibly triggered by the sheer volume of coaches, many of who were not actually coaches. I found out they were just people teaching people to do business. Yes. And I remember looking and going, there's no space for me. That person's already a life coach, or that person's already this. And this feeling of being, overwhelmed by it. And the ironic thing is, as soon as I niched down to introverts and then found this lovely little introvert bubble that we were talking about of people, you would think I would feel like that in that space, but I have never once felt like that. It feels always so supportive, and people know each other and recommend each other. And has that been your experience too?
It has, absolutely, because, whether it's Susanna Ray or Fifi Mason or, many of the other introvert coaches that I've been on podcasts with or been in their programs or whatever I've done, you're absolutely right. There is an element of, well, is there space for me here with all of this that's going on with introverts? But then I remind myself that with up to 50% of any population identifying as an introvert, there's more than enough for all of us. And we appeal to people in different ways. So I love the fact that we're here behind the scenes supporting and promoting each other. I find that very reassuring.
Me too. And it never feels competitive or any of those things. I've had people come on the podcast and we had a great conversation, and then they've said, "Oh, I'm looking to be a guest on other podcasts." And I'm like, "Let me connect you with 8 people because so many people in the same space." Or "Oh, this client runs a summit every year and you'd be great in it." And it's just really nice to be able to find your people. I know that's a very cliched way of saying it, but I think it's true in this case.
Well, and I think it is it right to say this even more true in the introvert case? Because most of us have spent years, or in my case, decades, being told to be something different, being told to push ourselves forward, to speak up, to, in other words, be more extroverted. So by the time we get to that point, we honestly think that we're not enough the way we are. So to then find out actually that there is a community of people who are, dare I say, proud of their introversion, who are owning and playing to their strengths, who are not hiding inside their introversion. It's like Wonderland opened up for me when I figured that out. So I just love it.
And I love that we all get on a call and we all just chat like we're old friends. We've never spoken before, and everyone's just like chatting away. And then I'm like, "Oh, I better hit record. We're here to do a podcast."
And isn't it great for dispelling the myths that introverts don't have anything to say for ourselves? Because we absolutely do. Get us on a topic that we're passionate about. And actually, the problem is shutting us up, not getting us talking.
That is one of the questions when I work with clients on their core values. And it's in one of my programs as well, where people can take themselves through to identify their top personal core values. One of the questions is, like, if you're in a social setting, what do you love talking about, to the point that you could go for hours and no one could shut you up? Because we've all got those things as introverts.
Absolutely. It's only the ones, I think, with social anxiety or who are misanthropes. And unfortunately, those things get conflated with introversion way too often for my liking. And they will try to convince people that actually they don't want to talk to anybody and they have nothing to talk about. But that's not pure introversion.
I know. And I've had this discussion before. I've got very extroverted friends who suffer from social anxiety. And someone actually reached out. Oh, it was a long time ago. And they were like, "Oh, can you make a podcast episode about having business with anxiety, please?" And I was like, "Well, no, because I'm not an anxious person. I don't have anxiety." And a very extroverted friend of mine, she was like, "I'll come and talk about it because, that's my reality totally." So the shyness, the anxiousness, the social awkwardness, I think all of those things get definitely tied up. And I am definitely not shy in the slightest. But, no. And as I can see, you're not either. But there are many times that I would just rather spend time on my own.
And when I have been in those either networking events, and I'm still a bit clumsy in networking, I'll own up to that one. But when I've been in those social situations, or I've emceed a big event, or I've delivered a live training to 500 people or whatever, come my feeling my batteries drain, I'm out of there. Yeah. So, I'm still that introvert at heart, but being an introvert doesn't mean that I can't behave and I can't use my social skills. And that's one of the things that I really want introverts to realize, is that, being an introvert, identifying as an introvert, does not mean that you're limited in some way. Actually, what it means is you have access to other things that other people don't. So make the most of it.
When did you discover the whole introvert thing? Everyone seems to have their moment that they realized that there were 2 different types of people. And then when they realized they're an introvert, everything made sense.
Absolutely. And I have my moment, so I'm no different. Because although I always knew I was different, even as a child, I would take myself to bed early to read in summer evenings when... Brilliant, isn't it? When everyone else was outside playing as late as they could, I was upstairs in my bed with often something like Enid Blyton's Magic Faraway Tree or something like that just took me off into pure escapism. And so I had known for a long time that I was different. And for me, I was in my 30s when I knew how I was different. And it was the first time I took the Myers Briggs type indicator. And I know a lot of people are very, poo-poo the Myers Briggs. But in my experience, it's the one moment when many introverts go, "You mean there are other people like me?" And it's this moment that the world opens up somehow. And I was on a women's development course run by Cranfield. It was very prestigious. I was still at BT at the time. And I took this Myers Briggs type indication. I read the little paragraph that everyone gets. And I read it and it was like someone could see inside my soul. And it's like, okay, now I understand. But that wasn't enough for me, because at the time I was already in the world of learning and development, coaching, facilitation, that sort of thing. And all of my peers and colleagues were big personalities. They, had everyone roaring around and rolling in the aisles and huge cheers at the end of whatever they'd done, which wasn't my style at all. But now I had a blueprint to understand what made them different. So now I had something to copy and try and be like in order to be more extroverted. So I then spent almost 2 decades trying to be more extroverted in order to fit in and get on.
How did
Not
that
a good
go?
plan. I'm pretty sure you can imagine where it ended up, and it ended up in introvert burnout, where I had 3 months where I took myself out of a particular situation where I really was being encouraged to be that extroverted trainer. And I took myself home and I stared at my screen for 3 months. I couldn't make a decision. I couldn't pick up a call. I couldn't create anything. I was literally completely done for.
Are you an INFJ?
ISFP.
ISFP. Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. See, I am an MBTI fan.
Me too.
I really think that, like you say, it's the first thing that most people come across. Of course, it's a generalization, because everything in these things is a generalization, because there's 16 types. But as long as you don't use it as a limitation and a label, I think it's so healthy. And clients and I use it a lot with team development. So I have, very creative clients, a lot of them, maybe INFP, then their business manager comes along, ESFJ, perfect. Because
absolutely
everyone has that pull to hire someone that's exactly the same as them. And it's like, no, you want someone that's different, because they're doing the different tasks in your business that you don't like.
Absolutely. You need somebody who complements, absolutely, rather than mirrors. We don't want mini-me's, because that's not going to serve us in any way, shape or form. So I trained as a Myers Briggs practitioner. I trained in step 2. And there are 2 things that stand out for me from that training, which I still refer back to fondly. The first is that your type is not an excuse for your behavior. And that really stuck with me. And the second is that those 16 rooms, we can inhabit every one of those rooms, and the route to some of them may be a bit cobwebby and dusted over because we don't go there very often. But that as a leader, my task in a way was to move elegantly so that I could flex to those styles, understanding where my anchor was. And those 2 things I think have served me really well over the years in terms of understanding how to use Myers-Briggs with people.
I think that's perfect. And, I talk about a lot of these different modalities, whether it's Enneagram or human design, and it's the same thing. Use them in I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway, in an empowering way.
Yes.
Because I can't think of a better way to describe it, but use it to, like you say, anchor yourself, ground yourself, use it to understand your strengths, use it to know where to say, I'm not going to go there because that's just not my thing and it's going to exhaust me, but not as I can't do this because.
Absolutely. The whole victimhood, and I am a member of quite a few introvert groups, and I see so much victimhood in those groups. And it really concerns me because people are using it as an excuse and saying, I can't, rather than, well, it's not my normal. What do I need to do to be able to do it? And of course, any of us in business know that we need to be able to step up to those different things, but perhaps we need different preparation. We need to be supercharged in our batteries to be able to do it. But there's no such thing as can't in my book. I either choose to or I choose not to.
Oh, Joanna, I love you already. We've only been talking for a few minutes. I have had a similar experience. I had to exit a number of introvert groups because the vibe it wasn't doing it for me. And I could feel very much the energy being sucked out of me by other introverts. I'm like, everyone blames extroverts for doing this to them, but
Yeah.
but when it's that victim, oh, I can't, and oh, it's too hard, and I find that obviously as a coach, if I have clients in that mindset, it's very different. But as like a big group of people in that mindset, the energy to me is very, very draining.
Yeah, it almost feels like a group of dementors to me, and I can feel my very energy being sucked out of me.
Well, back to the MBTI, I cried when I read mine because I went, oh, right, there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
This is normal. There's an actual personality type, and this is me. So first I cried, and then I had a friend who came to mind straight away because we were so similar in so many ways. And I sent the link to him and I said, take this test and tell me which 4 letters you get. And it took him about 15 minutes, and he came back and he went INFJ, Y. And I was like, okay. Now, so I understood the power of it even then, because I'd only done my own and read my own description. But in reading that description, I could see so much of him in it. And when he then backed it up by saying, these are the letters I got, that was it. I was all in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm still a big fan.
So how do you work with your introverts? Do you use their Myers Briggs as a foundational piece? Is it something you use all of the time? Just tell us how do you work with us? How do you help us?
So my business is Flourishing Introverts, because there are 2 things that I want to do that are around enabling introverts. One is to enable us to flourish without pretending to be something we're not. So I'm a big use the Dr. Lynn Sutt's definition of flourishing, which is about living a meaningful life through the ups and downs. So we know that there are challenges that go on and, all that bring us joy, all those sorts of things. And the second thing is that I am on a bigger, hairy, scary mission to shift the extroversion bias in education and business, because from early years education right the way through the organizational whole kind of life cycle, really, everything is geared up to the extrovert ideal. Whoever decided that was the thing, whoever decided that it was introverts who were neurodivergent and extroverts the norm, I have no idea. But because there are the up to 50% that identify as introverts, organizations from a DEI perspective need to wake up and recognize that actually they're doing a huge disservice to so many of their people. And we need to tackle that in education. So they're the 2 kind of strands of how I help introverts. Do I use Myers Briggs a lot? No, not necessarily. I've got my own quiz that helps people identify what type of introvert they are, so that it kind of removes all of those things and it just focuses on the type of introvert, because that's one of the things that I find really helpful to enable an introvert to play to their strengths, is really to focus in on that introversion and recognize just how many positive qualities there are.
It's so interesting. I think it's such an English-speaking country thing as well. I have done the same job here in the UK, and I've done the same job in Switzerland, and the traits that are valued were very, very different. And I've spent quite a lot of time in Scandinavia and seen the same thing. Their workplaces are very much set up to be calm and quiet and much more democratic, I'm going to say, in the way that meetings are conducted and communications. And then here in the UK, obviously in the States and a lot of other countries, there is that feeling of, and you talk to any introvert that's been in corporate in a high pressured role, and we all have the same experience. Oh yeah, I got talked over, I was ignored, it was this, it was that. So I find that so interesting that geographically as well, in a lot of countries, people don't even really think about being an introvert because it's so well catered to that they just feel accepted and part of society.
Absolutely. They're the cultures that have got inclusion done well, as far as I'm concerned.
Totally. So your own journey into business, we chatted a little bit about this before we hit record. You obviously got that background of, like you say, leadership, facilitation, personal development, all of those things. What was the crux? What made you go, okay, I'm branching out on my own?
It was when, it's a great question. And I love the journey I've had. I spent 19 years in BT, and they were 19 mostly fantastic years, because BT, British Telecom, were at their heyday then. You know, when I trained to be a trainer, it was about 6 weeks worth of training, whereas now you're lucky if you get 2 days to be a trainer. So, and then there was the facilitation skills, and then there was the, you know, how to design a course and how to measure, you know, so much support. It was fantastic. But I ended up in a role where I realized that I was being asked to kind of sell my soul, really. I was sacrificing who I really was. And I was expected to be inauthentic. And at that point, I thought, I can't do this anymore. Happened to coincide with British Telecom going through its big redundancy programs. So I stuck my hand up 3 years running, and finally I got out. And my plan had always been, once I left BT, because I thought, if I don't go now, I'm there for life. And I knew I didn't want to be there for life. And so I thought, I'm going to take 6 months out, because I'd never had a career break. And I'm going to design what I want my business to be, because I knew I wanted to be master of my own destiny from that moment onwards. And then, of course, I picked up my first gig at my leaving do. So I never did design my business. And if I can share that as a word of warning to anyone else who's thinking of skipping out of corporate and into running your own business, and by the way, I still think it's absolutely the best thing to do, so I wouldn't deter you from doing that at all. But work with someone like Emma-Louise, somebody who knows how to help people set up in business in a way that suits them for what they want to achieve. Otherwise, you'll end up doing what I had to do, which is go back and put all of those things in retrospectively. And I can tell you, it's much more difficult, much more painful to have to unpick things afterwards than it is to do them right in the first place. So you might have a slightly slower start, but a bit like when we're working with projects, it's about going slow in order to go fast later on. So do it right at the outset is what I'd say.
I've seen it over and over again, that someone with a business and it looks amazing and they've got this revenue and they've got all of these things. And then you look behind the scenes and I'm like, I can't look.
Yes.
And like you say, having to go backwards and then start doing that while you've already got a business that's fully up and running is much harder than getting the foundations laid at the start before everything starts.
Yeah, really difficult. So I strongly recommend that people go work with somebody who knows what they're doing, like you, so that they get it set up right in the first place.
What is your favourite thing about running your own business?
My favourite thing, I'll tell you what ought to be my favourite thing, but I'm not experiencing it right now. What ought to be my favourite thing is taking an afternoon off whenever I want an afternoon off. So like today, it's sunny. So today I'd love to go for a walk by the sea or go and do a bit of pottering in the garden, because the weekend was rubbish. I didn't get around to do it at the weekend. But when you get to that tricky stage in business where it's busy, but you haven't necessarily got the support and systems in place to be unbusy, where you're ending up working in the business too much so that you're not working on it, I can't necessarily take the time out. I'm working too many hours. So what should be my favorite thing is going, that's it, everything's organized, everything's teed up, I'll go and have the afternoon off. But it doesn't always work like that.
I've just had a season of working on my business and in my business at the same time, much more as we've been launching things. And it's now a bit of a, but it's that myth, I think, that you have complete flexibility, because of course we still have clients and we still have other things that we are committed to. And I have a client and she's fantastic and she's been with me for years. And when my Dubsado sends her a reminder about her next session, which is usually the next day, I get her autoresponder. And so often it's like, I'm not checking emails tomorrow because I've taken the afternoon off to go to the cinema. Or I've taken I've gone for a spa day with my mum. Like, this is brilliant.
Yeah,
and I always
absolutely.
love to see it. And I love that she's putting that on her autoresponder as well. So that's goals for all of us.
Absolutely. Someone shared with me recently, somebody's out of office, that read something like, it usually takes me 2 days to read emails and in order to properly digest them, and another 2 days to respond. I don't subscribe to this kind of, the pace of business right now. So, and I thought, well, I know many businesses that would be horrified at that, but you're managing people's expectations. That's fine as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. I know someone that has a capacity-based out of office on, so it's not, we will get back to you in X number of hours or days. It's, we answer email in order of importance as per capacity. And if you are a client and you need, urgent support with tech or something, email this other address. And if not, I'll get back to you when I can.
Yeah,
which,
perfect.
like you say, management of expectations, probably something you can't get away with in corporate as much. There's a beauty of having your own business. You can set your own out of office to be whatever you like.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's chalk that one up. That's another good one.
That's a definite tick. Now, obviously, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you my set questions, and I'm very excited for your answers to these, actually, after our conversation today. So first off, which book would you recommend to any of my audience who are business owners or even anyone listening in corporate thinking of starting a business?
The book that's probably has been my favorite for some time now is Resonant Leadership by Boyatsis and McKee, because within it's got the intentional change model. And most of the clients that I work with, and probably people setting up in their own business, are setting up in their own business because they are taking people through some kind of intentional change process. And I absolutely love that. It's probably no more than we are intuitively doing. But what it does is it kind of puts it in a structure that has us go, aha, right, yeah, I can see where we are. And it's really helpful to take clients through that process. And so I would absolutely recommend Resonant Leadership for people either thinking of leaving in corporate or actually running their own business already.
See, I knew I was going to be excited because I've never read that book. I love it when someone says a book that I've never read. Like, yes, add it to my list. Perfect. And we talked a little bit about your journey, but in all of those years, what's the biggest reframe or shift in belief that you had to have that enabled you to get where you are today?
The absolute biggest one is when I allowed myself to own my introversion with pride, with a sense of equity, not from that kind of victim mentality. So to really own my introversion, to take time to understand my strengths, and then to learn how to articulate them positively. So over years, and many of your listeners who are introverts will have heard this at some stage, when people say, oh, you're so quiet. Why don't you speak up more? Why don't you say more? Why don't you this? And in the past, I would have mumbled an apology. I would have, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I don't say very much, or whatever I would have said. And the biggest reframe for me was actually being able to say, thank you for noticing. As an introvert, one of my absolute strengths is my ability to listen empathically and actively and generatively. So I hear what's being said. I also notice what's not being said. And that allows me to summarize and to make sure that everyone is heard. So the only way I can do that is by using my introvert skills. So thank you for noticing. And that still blows me away when people find a way to articulate their strengths positively, their introvert strengths positively. It rocks the world as far as I'm concerned.
I love that. And it reminded me of a meme that I saw ages ago, and it was an article. I think it was from Oprah, disappointingly. But it said, introverts, how to speak up more. And someone had then pasted underneath, why don't they have an article saying extroverts, how to quieten down?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Why is it always that way? Joanna, it was so lovely to speak to you. And thank you for sharing all of that, your journey and your wisdom. I'm going to put all of your links down in the show notes, including the book recommendation. So everyone go and connect with Joanna, find out more about her and listen to her podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Emma-Louise.
Thank Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ambitious Introvert podcast with me, Emma-Louise Parks. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes. As a thank you, one lucky reviewer each month will win a 60-minute one-on-one coaching session with me, where you'll get the clarity and confidence to attract your ideal clients. And if you know someone who could benefit from listening to the show, then please do share and help me reach as many fellow ambitious introverts as possible.